Hi. Welcome to the first installment of the Pilates mat module. This is Hannah. She's going to be demonstrating. I want to start with just core activation, which is just the basic way to teach a client how to understand what their core is and how to feel it, since that's actually, I think, most people's most desired thing when they come into this Pilates studio is that they want their core to be stronger.
Yes.
So we talked about, go ahead and lay down. We talked about previously the core tet. So just to review, the four muscles of the core are the deepest abdominal muscle, which is the transversus abdominis, which runs transversely, which means it runs side to side. So two cues for that muscle in general are to narrow your ASIS. These are your ASIS points. So to narrow those 2 points, so there's a narrowing function of the transversus abdominis. And also just scooping your navel in towards your spine, which is what we always say in Pilates, is pull your navel in, scoop the belly in, draw your organs back. And there's a lot of ways of saying the same thing. The transversus abdominis is responsible for basically holding your organs in. So that's a good cue. So then there's your pelvic floor at the bottom. And cues like draw your coccyx towards your pubic bone, draw your sit bones together, draw all those bones together. That's all pelvic floor cueing, right? So the two sit bones on either side, the coccyx in the back and the pubic bone in the front, form a diamond. And when those bones draw together, your pelvic floor contracts. And I'm going to give you a lot of ways to cue that, but that's your basic pelvic floor cueing. And then you have the multifidus on the back. Those muscles you can't really cue. No one can cue their multifidus, but we can show you different ways to fire it and for the trainer to feel it on somebody else. So we'll do that. And then the diaphragm, which again is just a breathing muscle. So as long as you're breathing, hopefully your diaphragm is contracting and expanding. So the diaphragm and the pelvic floor both descend on the inhale and they both ascend on the exhale. So that's just something to be aware of. I generally cue the core on an exhale. So that's how I do it. There's different ways of approaching breath, but that's my general overall way to cue. So I'm going to use this ball. The ball is a great general proprioceptive tool to cue the inner thigh. I mean, usually putting it in between people's thighs or their ankles sometimes, but it's cueing the inner thigh. It's also keeping her in alignment here, so she won't be turning out, which people love to do. But when you cue the inner thigh, it also helps to feel the pelvic floor and the whole inside core line. So that's a great prop. So again, this is one way to cue the core. I'm going to show you another way because this way can be very difficult for people sometimes when they're lying on their back to actually engage their core. Often they'll just engage everything else instead of pulling in. So I'm going to show you another way, which is kind of more foolproof than this. So this is basically going to be a coccyx curl or a pelvic tilt. So we're just going to start in neutral pelvis. So so neutral pelvis is defined as the pubic bone in the front. So everyone has, I usually don't touch someone's pubic bone, but they can touch it if they really want to. And then the ASIS, these hip points, is the anterior superior iliac spine, right? So those are bony landmarks, your hip points right here. So those 3 points create a triangle. When your pelvis is neutral, that triangle, it's creating like a plane, right? That is parallel now to the floor, right? So when people lie down, they almost never lie down in neutral just because your butt is there and gravity. Most people, when they lie down, they're more tucked under. So to put someone into neutral pelvis often feels very weird for them. And sometimes their ribs will completely flare off the mat and they'll be like, how is this neutral? I'm completely in back extension. And it's kind of true. A lot of times that's true. So you want to just look and make sure the pelvis is neutral. That is an objective thing that you can see. The rest of the spine, people are going to have different curvatures depending on what's going on in their body. Also, if they have a really big bum, it also might make a bigger curve because you're lying on your bum. So all these things are going to matter. So just remember, lying supine is not like standing up. It doesn't tell you anything about their posture, actually, because gravity is working in on a completely different way. So, but you can look at the objective neutral pelvis. And here we are. She's doing a nice job. It's neutral. Okay. So she's just going to take a deep breath in. Now, you can do Pilates breathing when you first start with a client, like accordion breathing. So you can put your hands on them or they can put their hands on themselves and feel it. If you're teaching a group class, obviously, they're going to put their own hands on here. And you can cue them to expand like an accordion laterally into their rib cage. And what that does is it's trying to stop the natural movement of the rib cage is to elevate when you inhale, which is normal to have the rib cage kind of lift up. In Pilates, you don't really want that because it's a destabilizing movement for your spine if you're constantly extending every time you inhale. So if you tell someone to breathe into the sides, and the accordion breathing is breathing laterally, that also tends to send the air backward. If you tell someone to breathe backward, it's hard to know how to do that, but they can proprioceptively breathe sideways, and that's more thoracic breathing. So if you put your hands here and put your thumbs around the back, because the thumbs around the back are part of what you want to do, which is ribs are rolling to the back of your body too. So see if you can expand into your thumbs. Yeah, and try not to change everything else. See if you can just breathe into so it's called thoracic breathing because you're literally trying to expand rather than always making your belly poof out completely. You're trying to send more of the air into your thoracic area, to your rib cage. So that's just a strategy that you can get people to breathe. By the way, if someone has breathes 3 times in a row, they're basically relaxed. So deep breathing is a way to get someone into their sympathetic nervous system, which is something we want in Pilates. We want them to be in their mind-body moment, not in their fight or flight sympathetic nervous system. So it's not a bad idea to have people breathe, especially if you live in places like New York and stressful environments where people are stressed out, right? All right, so that's just something you can start with. So don't worry about it too much because we're going to breathe. So take a deep breath in. Now, all she's going to do is again, sometimes you have to ask people, can I touch you? You don't assume if someone's had trauma or something, they might like freak out. So they can always also put their own hand if it's a class situation, right? Because this can be helpful proprioception. So take a deep breath in, you can expand into your rib cage. Now she just did a big belly breath. On the exhale, just think of pulling your skin and your organs away from your hand. So she's going to try to pull her belly in or do a scoop. Sometimes the cue of pulling your skin away can help people understand, like that proprioception of their skin sometimes helps people understand what they're doing. So just scooping in. So here we go. So now I'm going to add a pelvic tilt to the exercise. And I'm going to grab onto this ball. And this is going to help her feel her pelvic floor, hopefully. So just take a nice deep breath into your thoracic spine if you can. On the exhale, just think of scooping your belly in, and you're going to do a pelvic tilt. And don't let me take the ball out. So you have to use your inner thighs. But I'm going to pull. I'm kind of pulling it. Don't go into your glutes yet. I'm going to pull it, and that directional pull might help you feel your pelvic floor because the pelvic floor kind of has a lifting sensation. So if I pull it this way, she's hopefully feeling. Do you feel that a little bit? The feeling of lifting the pelvic floor. So that can be a nice cue to have to pull out. And then release back to neutral pelvis. Let your sit bones open. Take a deep breath in. All you're going to do is on the exhale, think of drawing your organs back, flattening your lower back. So I'm asking her not to roll up into her bridge yet because the second that she starts to actually lift her pelvis up, she'll be working her hamstrings and glutes. That's the next part of a bridge, but the first part of the pelvic tilt is literally just your core. That makes sense? So it's more your front body, not so much your back body, your legs, and all that stuff. So a lot of in Pilates, what we're trying to teach is muscle sequencing. And so I'm kind of a stickler for this in class. I'm always like, okay, everybody, don't skip the core before you lift up into a bridge, right? People are coming to Pilates because they want to engage their core. So you take your time here, you take a deep breath in, let everything expand on the inhale. On the exhale, I want to see her draw her belly in. She's doing a great job. Flatten your lower back and just do that pelvic tilt. Now you can give the cue of draw your coccyx towards your pubic bone. See if you can hold that pelvic tilt. And draw your sit bones together. And that's pelvic floor cueing, which may or may not work for the client. And then when she releases, she's going to open her sit bones, and that releases her pelvic floor, and she comes back to neutral pelvis. So that's a pelvic tilt. Inhale, exhale. Don't do anything until the exhale. Okay. So you're going to inhale and everything like expand. On the exhale, we'll do the core activation. She's going to scoop her belly in, nice. Coccyx draws toward the pubic bone, sit bones draw together. So that's her core activation. Now, if she keep going, she can roll up into a bridge. Now keep your tail between your legs. Yes, and see if you can roll up in a pelvic tilt. Now she's using your hamstring as a glute. So we've gone beyond the core. once you start lifting up into a bridge. Do you feel that?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not wrong to do it. I always want to make sure that people don't skip the core and go right into their hamstrings or their glutes, which they could do. By the way, the glutes inhibit the core. So if she just started and she just squeezed her glutes, you're already activated, so you're not doing it. But some people, the squeeze the glutes, everything just comes popping out. So sometimes if you just start with your glutes, if you're one of those people who's like a big tucker person, it'll completely inhibit the core from activating. So that's partly why you don't want them to do it. You always want to start with the core activation. Let's try it one more time. She's going to take a deep breath in. And then she's going to exhale, pull the belly in, flatten the lower back. Good. So first it's her front body, and when she can't go any further, then she can start to roll up into her bridge. It's interesting. You stop being able to tilt when you start to do a bridge, and I'm curious about that. So because ideally what I want to see with you, try it one more time. Exhale, pull your belly in. See if you can keep your tail between your legs. Keep your tail between your legs. Keep your tail between your legs. Keep your tail. So I think you have some tightness in this part of her back. You might not be able to notice this, but I can tell some people can do more rounding. Yeah. And then release back to neutral spine. So that's one basic way to engage the core. And again, we moved into a bridge, that's normally what I do. But starting with the core and don't skip the core. Okay. Part 2 is going to be in a quadruped. Yeah, it's fine. So now this position actually I find to be much easier for people. First of all, they can really feel their sit bones. Again, do you mind if I touch your sit bones? So her sit bones are her ischial tuberosities. They're basically the bones that you sit on, your hamstrings attach into them, but they're also where your pelvic floor attaches. So if she opens her sit bones, I can put my fingers here and I can spread her sit bones open. So that's what her pelvic floor stretching open. You can feel it much more in this position. Yeah. Go into the back extension. So I'm going to let her go into full back extension. Good. Now she's going to, try to keep your head where it is at first. Start with your sit bones drawing together. So that's her pelvic floor. Her coccyx draws toward her pubic bone, and then her abdominals are going to come in, and then she goes into full flexion. Now here's her cat stretch. So now I can really see how much she can flex her back. And if you can see this shape, wait, hold it. She has a great thoracic curve, but then here it's not rounding that much. Now, just as a comparison, someone else might be able to really round this part of their back, just so you can, now I can tell she has a lack of mobility here. It's nothing wrong with it. Everyone's different. You'll see differences in people, you know what I mean? And that's partly why she couldn't do that coccyx curl as juicy as some other people can, right? It's just big curve here, less of a curve here. So it's nothing wrong with it. She doesn't have a back problem, right? You don't have any injuries, right? No. Now she's going to open her sit bones and then come into her cow. Full back extension. Here she goes. Good. Now one more time, cat stretch. Sit bones draw together, belly pulls in. She's coming into flexion. So this is flexion of the spine. Now from here, we're going to go to neutral spine. So it's somewhere in between. She's going to open her sit bones. She's going to have a little bit of lumbar extension. Her shoulders are down the back, and she has a little bit of a cervical extension. So she's doing a great job. So these are 2 extension curves. And what she's not doing, she's doing it great. She's not letting her rib cage hang down, which would be the full back extension. Right? Her ribs are staying nice and supported. So that's neutral spine. Now she's going to keep her gorgeous neutral spine. And you're going to just take a deep breath in without changing the shape of your spine. You can let your organs hang down like you're a pregnant cat. Inhale, let it all hang down. On the exhale, all she's going to do is lift her organs up. And I have my hand on her belly so she can pull up away from me. Yeah, good. Inhale, let your organs hang down. Can you feel that? So now she's also working her transversus abdominis against gravity. So it's actually more obvious what's going on because your gravity, right? You're actually having to work against gravity. When you're lying on your back, you don't have to work. This is also another strategy to make sure that they have a little bit of a lumbar curve. You can put a little roller on their lower back. And then you also know that they're staying stable. Exhale, she's going to lift her organs up. Can you feel that? So this is another way to activate your core. We could take it up a notch, curl your toes under, inhale, lift your organs, float your knees up. Oh, she lost her roller. Good. Now she's working from here to lift her knees up. This is like a really hard exercise, isn't it? Yeah. And then come back down. That's called a bear plank. So those are 2 ways to introduce the core. And by the way, while we're here she is, do that again. Inhale, lift your organs up, send your right leg back into a plank, Send your left leg back into a plank. Don't change anything. I just taught her how to do a neutral spine plank. On every exhale, she can lift her organs up and re-engage her core because she knows how to do that now because we just taught her how to do that.
Yeah.
So now it's a neutral spine plank. That is not a given, by the way, that someone's going to do a neutral spine plank when they go onto a plank. Bring your knees back in and take a break. You can sit back and just get a nice child's pose. So those are two ways to activate your core. Of course, I love planks because, that's how you should teach a plank, by the way. Cat, cow, neutral spine, core activation, plank. And then they understand how to hold their plank. So those are two ways to activate your core. And also one way to teach a plank, which is a wonderful exercise to teach a client.